So Holden Kim asks for 5 likes in the community. Can you interpret the symbolism of casting lots in the Bible? Yeah, that's a very important symbolism. My brother Mathieu is really good at this, like understanding this. Really, the idea of casting lots is basically giving up order, giving up reason. You don't account for a logical procession of decision making in order to make a decision. So you leave it up to chance. You leave it up to non rational causes. And so what does that mean? And so, for example, like if let's say you want to hire someone, you decide, you look at the job, right? You look at the candidate, you look at whether their skills match the job, right? And then you compare the different candidates, and then you pick the candidate that is the best suited for the position. And so that's a completely logical way by which you join heaven and earth, right? So you're doing that all the time. Every time almost all the decisions you make are based on a rational, like reasonable connection between heaven and earth. Okay. Now, what casting lots is a giving up of that reason. So it's related to games. So you think about it that way. It's related to the place at the end of the day, or the moment of rest that my brother Matthew talks about, the remainder of the cycle, where at the end, causality breaks down, work breaks down. You don't work anymore. You don't unite heaven and earth in a reasonable way, and then you rest. And in the moments when you rest, then the types of causalities are different. There are circular causalities. There are refreshing, and so that's why we play games at that time. That's why we cast lots. And so think about games of chance in terms of money-making games of chance. Now, when you work, your work is related to the amount of money that you get. So you put in work, you till the ground, you do whatever, you build things, you sell things, and the amount of work will relate to a return in value, right? So that is completely reasonable. But if you go to the casino and you put all on black, then the reason goes away. Like the way in which you receive money or not receive money or lose money is not related to work. Like it's not related to anything that you do that's reasonable that will account for the return. And so it's basically giving up to chaos. And so this is what Mathieu explains really well in his book, is that doing that can also be a way of, say, increasing, of leavening of the system, right? It's kind of like an external agent that is not related to the being that will also increase it. So a good way would be to think about it like you have the earth and you have the waters. And so casting lots is basically kind of like looking into the pool, right? Looking into the visionary pool, looking down into the waters and seeing what's there. And so you throw dice, you play cards, you do all this stuff. And also you can cast lots to tell the future. You can cast lots to try to gain power for yourself. You can give up your reason in order to gather the dark kind of chaotic power that's down there and make it serve your purpose. And that is why in most religious worlds, games of chance are prescribed, or at least they are castigated. They're seen as bad. You don't, going to the casino, participating in games of chance is seen as something that is not good. That's why casting lots in the sense of, reading the bones of an animal, or, reading tea leaves, or doing all that stuff is seen as negative, because you're trying to use something beyond reason in order to predict the future or to gain power for yourself. So a lot of occultic practices will be related to this kind of dark power. It's the power of the residues too, right? That's why if you think about black magic, the use of fingernails or or different residues of a person can be kind of used against them. All that stuff is related to the idea of casting lots, all of that. But now there is another way in which casting lots, so think about it, when God creates the world, he separates the waters. There's the waters below and there's the waters above. And most of the casting of lots is something like trying to gain the mystery of the waters below, trying to gain the mysteries of non-causal, of non-rational causes in order to increase yourself, like winning at games of chance. But there's also a way in which lots can give you access to the higher aspect, and that's trickier. And in some ways, it's something that, it makes it weird because, you see, for example, in when the disciples decide to replace Judas with a new disciple, like to make the 12, they at first use reason to bring themselves down to the last candidates. And then at the end, they open up the space. So they open up a non-reasonable venue for causality to happen, in the idea that they're basically now yielding up. They're opening up a space for God to act in the world and to reveal his will. And so, that's what the Urim and Thummim were for. That's what the divination tools in the Old Testament, there were some aspects of divination that were seen as wrong, the ones that were there to increase your own power, but there were some aspects of divination which were seen as normal, which were the ones in which you opened up a space of non-reasonable discourse in order to be able to perceive the will of God and to follow the will of God no matter what, right? Not try to control it, not try to dominate over it or to use it to your own advantage. And these practices, there's still some that exist today. I was talking a long time ago. I was talking to a bishop in the OCA, and they said that they still practice that. And so if they need to choose the next metropolitan, or they need to choose a candidate like a bishop or something, they will use their reason as much as possible. And so they will basically try to find the best candidate, make sure that it's the right one. But if they cannot agree after deliberation, after discussion on who the best candidate is, then they will cast lots in order to choose the person. And then you basically open it up and you don't decide, and you don't decide. You basically let God decide for you by doing that. And so that is the symbolism of casting lots. And that's why it has a double symbolism. That's why, on the one hand, it's seen as very dangerous and very dark and something that you don't want to engage in, because it's basically, it can be, basically opening yourself up to chaos. Think about people who go to the casino. That's what it is. It's like they can lose everything. For a game of chance, they can lose their money. They don't just gain it. But that there's also versions of divination and of opening up to casting lots that is related to this other aspect, which is opening up towards the higher causalities. So, yeah. Dan Muir poses an interesting question. He says, R.E. bishops casting lots, why would we ever deliberate anything if rituals allow God to decide? And so, see, that is such a Puritan way of seeing. Like, it is really, in some ways, like, it's Protestantism encapsulated in a question. It's like, you could also, let's take the question that you asked and let's make it bigger. Let's say, why would you pray if God already knows what you need? Why would you pray for others if God already knows what they need and will decide and give them what they want? Why have the rituals if God already knows what is true and right and good and that his will be real, will be real in the world? It's like these are all levels of the same question. Why ask other people to pray for you if you can just pray to God, right? And why pray for others? All these questions, all of this is related. And the answer is because that's how creation works. That is what creation is. That is what creation is. Creation is our participation in the life of God. And so our reason and our capacity to deliberate is what God has given us to manifest the names of the world and to participate and to be co-rulers, co-creators with God in the world. And so we participate in that through all of these things, through our reason, through our actions, through our through our love of one another, through our praying for others. All of this participates, and there is a sense in which we always also have to be open to God in some ways being the last resort, not the last resort, but in some ways the possibility of God, speaking into our process. And so the idea that you would in some ways reason as much as possible. And the thing is, it's funny because you do that more than you think, by the way, even though you do not, let's say, anything that you decide what you're going to do, you cannot exhaust the reasonable analytics of something. And so you often, very, very often, will analyze two possible paths for yourself, and you'll do it for a certain amount, and then at some point you'll drop it, and the reason why you choose one over the other cannot be accounted for in terms of reason, and you do that all the time. And that is actually in some ways also this kind of this play between the reason and this openness that is part of reality. Because if you try to reason yourself into a decision completely, you'll get stuck in the minutes. You'll get stuck in these little calculations and these little comparison that will become more and more pointed, and you'll never. Well, it's sometimes difficult. Sometimes it's clear. You have two candidates for a job, right? You have two candidates for a job, and then one person, and then they have the same skills, the same education. They basically are the same person on paper. They're pretty much the same. And so you're like, well, I'm going to go with my hunch. I'm going to go with the hunch. What the hell is a hunch? Hunch is a giving up of the rational means of decision making into a kind of intuition about what is real. And so it's not exactly the same as casting lots, but it's very similar in the sense that it's a letting go of reason in order to be able to also kind of grasp the world in a more kind of immediate, less reasonably caused way. And so this image of the bishops reasoning their way to two candidates, let's say, or the disciples, and then opening it up to God, let's say, intervening in the last moment, is an image of how reality works. It's an image of how you do things all the time. So hopefully that's understandable.